Hey everybody, welcome back to another Street Epistemology review show. Today I've got Will, Dali, and Quayd. What's up, y'all?
Life is good.
Good, awesome. Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Right.
Not bad at all.
Cool. Yeah, today we are watching one of Peter Boghossian's videos, recent videos, in the Spectrum SE style, I guess we're now calling it, where he talked with some students. I'll leave the university anonymous. We didn't really specify where that was, somewhere in Oregon. And it's about some conversations about, is America racist? I think that was the claim on the board, the whiteboard there on campus. And two people showed up and participated in the Spectrum SC conversation, where Peter attempts to moderate and ask SE style questions. And I guess another question is this SE? Should we qualify this as SE potentially? It seems to align with some of the goals of SE, where you're trying to help people reflect on the quality of their reasons about something. And if they're on a good spectrum of confidence or agreement, if that is like a rational place to be on that. So this is all open for discussion, and we'll try not to get bogged down into like arguing over the actual claim here, but try to like actually, review the quality of the SE rather than the claim.
I'm here for the bogged down. Well, one of the things that's interesting about this sort of approach of SE is that oftentimes in sort of, I don't know what we would call standard SE or classical SE. Let's say classical SE, it sounds fancy. Classical SE, you'd go out and the conversation topic is very much sort of defined by your interlocutor, your conversation partner, right? They're the ones that's going to sort of bring the thing that they think of as true, the claim. And in this example, the claim I think is very much set, right? So is America racist? And then what you do is, rather than let people define their claim, they sort of define where they are on the position, which is I guess, functionally fine. But the challenge I have with this claim, though, is that it's really it's already a very complicated sort of semantics issue. What does it mean for an entire country to be racist? Does it mean any amount of racism? Does that make a country racist? If there is one racist in the country, is the country racist? Does it have to be 50% of the country be racist? So it's already a claim that sort of has some really significant ambiguity in there. And I think for exploring it on this sort of spectrum, it's almost like we're setting people up to become confused and enter into maybe semantically boggy ground. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think America is racist is a sufficient claim?
Yeah, I mean, seems like it's definitely a claim.
I think as a claim, people could have a position on that fits on a 7-point scale. And I think people could be found in all the positions, and they could have reasons to want to move people to positions. I think for Spectrum SE, that's the goal of the claim.
Yeah, one thing that I'll say that I don't like about the Spectrum SE, I like it when SEers are playing it because I feel like it's a different dynamic. But when it's random people, people have raised this before too, but I think there's this concern of people being persuaded by how other people move. And I'm constantly seeing that in videos when I'm watching it, and I don't know how much I like that.
So, wait, but if my political party moves to a particular position, is it a bad thing if I just choose that as a default?
I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be, but I'm noticing when people are, I mean, like, I want to know what somebody's position would be if they weren't around other people also telling us what they think. That's why I kind of like the individual. Not to say that they don't both have their pros and cons.
This is another component of this, though. There's a sense to which there's an element of embarrassment that's going on, or boredom in some cases. And, people aren't feeling like that you're talking to the person directly. I think with a claim that's definitionally a bit ambiguous. I mean, I don't disagree that people will have an opinion on the idea that America is racist, but I think it very quickly gets down into a space where you'd want to define what those terms mean. So in normal, like classical SE, what we would do is, what do we mean by America? What do we mean by racist? And then what do we mean by America being racist, before we'd even begin to understand why they think that. The problem is, if you've got sort of 3 or 4 people that you're talking to about this, and they've interpreted that question differently, and that's why they're standing in different places on the spectrum, the semantic game is somewhat amplified, and I think that it could end up with somebody thinking, oh, I didn't think of it like that, now I feel dumb, or like, oh, maybe that's not how I understood the question. So yeah, I guess that's kind of one of the reasons why I felt like the ambiguity of it was a challenge.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitions is something we usually try to incorporate in SE conversations, and that's not going to be as easy in
Right.
the spectrum SE conversation.
So I think if you're doing a spectrum SE thing, I think it would be really beneficial to have a much more tightly worded claim, like a more clearly worded claim than just America is racist discuss.
I don't see any reason also that you couldn't like say, okay, here's the claim. Do we want to define anything and then redo the claim in such a way that everybody agrees on what's exactly
That would
being
work.
talked about?
Yeah, if you knew you were going to be playing this with 3-4 people or something, you could collectively as a group define what we mean by America being racist before everybody went and stood on the positions. That would be perfectly good. Yeah, I like that.
And maybe if there's an ambiguity problem, just let them move to their line and you find out that it's a problem, but then redefine the claim as you're playing to something more concise and asking, okay, now that we have a more concise claim, where would you be? And hopefully that it clears up any problem. And just go with that more clear claim. You don't have to stick with whatever's on the board. You can just, as you're playing, improvise.
I like that format because it allows me the extra step of, let's say I have everybody fall into 1 or 2 lines. I might see that there is still a spread. And if I redefine not just for definitions, but if I redefine the question that spreads them back out to a range, it's better for the conversation. So figure out what's different between them and then just examine that component. I think that's most excellent. I'm not trying to just be divisive. I'm just trying to say it works better if there's some contrast.
Right. So we'll keep talking about this as we get into the video.
America's racist. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move.
Very different from like, let's agree a definition.
So
now, let's agree what we're talking about. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. You've got to decide now. It doesn't matter what it is. Just it's on your own head, be it.
Yeah, we skipped a lot of rapport building and of the rules and stuff. It's not like you're just grabbing 2 people and starting with this.
America's racist.
How much before he said it did they know the claim? Was it written?
It was written on the board, and
so they had a minute or more to think about their position. Yes.
Yeah, and we cut out a lot of him explaining the rules, like, and definitely have where you want to go in mind before you move. That's another thing he usually says.
Yeah, on the face of it, watching these videos, it is kind of jarring to like, there's the claim and then go, and especially the way he says it. Sometimes, like, I interpret it as abrupt, so I'm like, oh, that's
true.
He is abrupt in his demeanor generally. I think. I don't think that's necessarily his fault. I think it's just partly just the way he communicates.
It's just his personality. Yeah.
Your reasons for standing on slightly agree.
Well, I have a lot of friends of color, and seeing the things that they go through versus what I go through. For example, in high school, me and a friend who was black went into a store. We did go in separately and went to separate aisles, and in that store, she had everyone, like 2 employees following her. They didn't know her. We had never been in that store before, and they automatically assumed that she was shoplifting.
How do you know they assumed that?
Because they came up to her and they said, "Are you shoplifting?"
And what did she say?
She said no. She asked why that they thought that, and then one of them straight told her that she's black, so they just assumed.
Oh, so they were at least honest with her.
They were honest, but it was still, I don't know if I would say racist or prejudice, but it still was going against her skin color.
Okay, so
she was. They both went into a store, and only her black friend was being followed by 2 security guards, who then said the reason they're following only her friend was because their friend was black, and then she wasn't sure if it was a racial thing or not. That seemed a little bit confused.
That last bit doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right.
And the anecdote itself seems a little far-fetched in today's time. Like, that seems very risky for shop customers to do. They would be fired immediately by the manager, or they would be sued because that's just a direct, obvious violation of some,
So maybe one confirmatory fact too many.
Yeah.
I am interested in the, I don't know if she said it, but the race or ethnicity of the store owners. I don't think it's far fetched at all.
Oh,
But
right.
no.
Okay.
Well,
no, I don't. But depending on certain circumstances, the area that you're in would increase the chances you would get sued or in trouble for it. But if you're in certain areas, I could totally see it. Nothing happening.
When I was
So
a teenager, even in say Long Beach or Los Angeles, that would have been normal.
What year was that? Sorry.
I'm a 66 model, so I would say in the 80s,
Okay.
in Los
Yeah.
Angeles or Long Beach, that would have been the norm.
Yeah. I would
So I
be
think
less
in a-
skeptical if it was the 80s. Yeah, definitely.
I also think in a moment she does say like it was a small town, like it was a small country. I think she mentioned it was somewhere out in the sticks somewhere, so maybe that's a factor. But it also could be like the case that this is a story that she has to reinforce this narrative that she has, this idea that she has, and maybe because she's retold this so many times, she's maybe skipped a lot of steps and she's maybe misremembering it slightly. So it could be exactly as she stated. I mean, but it would seem rather brazen that that was the reason given by the store as to why they were following the friend.
Yeah. And we can still take that, as true, not
Yeah.
even question it, and use it as a reason for believing that America is racist. Just make
Yep.
sure we're in that context. Or just, yeah.
But it would be evidence that that store is racist, not necessarily America. And again, this is one of the challenges with the definition, right? How do you prove an entire country is racist? That's a very tricky thing to do.
I mean, or if I was the owner of the store, would I want to have that claim be made? The store is racist if I have some employees that do that? I don't know if I would go that far. Hard to say. Anyway, keep going.
And you're saying that's not a one-off. That's like a common thing.
I've seen a lot of it. I'm from a smaller town in Southern Oregon, and they're just the things that are said, and people back it up by the fact like, oh, it's America, like we have freedom of speech, and that often that freedom of speech gets mixed up in. I mean, you do have freedom of speech, but a lot of times people will use that freedom of speech in order to use hate speech.
Okay. Do you agree with everything she said? I mean, I know you don't know her friend, obviously, but do you agree with the sentiment?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. So why are you on the strongly agree line?
Because I believe in the systemic inequalities that exist in the U.S.
Okay. So that's different from what you said. So he mentioned the word systemic.
Systemic, yes.
So do you think there are systemic inequalities?
I do. I don't know. I feel like I haven't done enough research to really.
That's fair.
Yeah, I might believe in it, but I don't have the facts to back up what I like in order to get.
Yeah.
He's not using names. That's something that keeps bugging me. So he's like, he said that and she said this, and it sounds very, he said, she said, to be frank. But yeah, I never liked that. And the other thing I don't like that just happened then is he's like saying that's fair. Like he's now judging the responses coming from the people he's speaking to. So he's inviting them to speak and then he's passing judgment on it, which happens a lot in his videos. I fear. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like ideally keep it neutral, even if you're positively enforcing some stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the reason he doesn't use names, I think he's just new to YouTube and he doesn't like that people, have their names out there in public, but they have their face out there. I don't see what the problem with using a name.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
there was a weird thing with the first question he asked where he was like, well, at least the store owner was honest about it. Like, that's fair, isn't it? And it's like, that was a little weird there, but.
Oh, and a wild Janosch appears. Hey, Janosch.
Yeah.
Hey there.
The
Yeah,
worst
just-
Pokemon.
I just saw it on Twitter and I thought I have time. I could join.
Okay, cool. I'll keep going.
Into a conversation about it.
So you're saying it's more on an individual basis, and the gentleman on the strong agree, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that he's saying it's more of a system-wide thing. Is that right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's really hard for me to speak on it being a white person, just because I only see what happens in my group. I never lived through the oppression
Sure.
or the racism or any of that. But on top of that, I feel like America is based in racist ideals. And if you look at who the land is stolen from.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but every single thing you said to me indicates that you should be on the agree line.
Is that the most important thing that we should be correcting for her? Because she's making quite a large number of claims that are supporting her that need to be explored, really. Like, why does she believe America is founded on racist ideals, right? That seems like a claim that's worth exploring. Like, does she have a reason to believe that? And this dynamic has already gotten sort of weird with, you know, this guy sort of vaguely pacing, looks bored, and, you know, he's not engaged in this at all. He's waiting to be spoken to. Whenever he gets a chance to speak, he's getting the 1 word or 2 words in before Peter's yanking the microphone away to continue the conversation with the lady. But yeah, like I feel like we're not getting to the epistemology of any of the things that are being said, which is a real shame, because there were lots of really interesting things there.
Sure, yeah, I would want to be more cognizant of like the sharing of time with the microphone. I don't want to let anyone hog it and monopolize that.
Was this on the tour, Reid?
Yeah.
Okay.
The second to last day.
Okay.
Also, I feel like the scale. I don't think it's that much that important where on the scale you actually are. I think it's more important that you are aware there is a scale, that you can move up or down, and that you just find a number or a place on the scale where you put yourself. And after that, I feel like you should talk about the claim and the reasons, and not so much about the scale.
Yeah, I'm not sure I dislike his question. What he's really, because I think we would do that in a 1-to-1 SE session. You'd say, okay, what you're saying, you're at 80%, but you seem like you're very confident. Like, why would you not be more confident? Because that's an interesting question to ask. I don't think he's saying you should be moved. He's more saying, like, why? What are your why are you hesitant, sort of thing. But I just felt like you could have gotten to the epistemology in what, based on what she was saying. Here are some reasons she had to support her position. So how confident is she that those reasons are true, and you know, what is the evidence that she has for those reasons are accurate?
I think that's an important that emphasizes the importance of the phrasing of things, because he could have said what would put you at the agree, and he's done that before, actually. So he has done that, but that shows I think the importance of the phrasing. Like, you should be here, shouldn't you, is different than what would get you here, or something like that.
Yeah, and he could have been using this question to try to. I can't read that. There's something in the way. Yeah, trying to understand her hesitance. So trying to get more reasons out of her, rather than trying to actually ask that question literally, potentially. We'll keep going.
I didn't choose the agree line just because I was nervous and I didn't know. I think it's...
Well, what do you think is true? You should stay on the line you think is true.
Yes.
So I'm not telling you to move.
I would phrase it as the most rational line to be at.
You should. He sounded like he was telling her off. And again, this is a really unfortunate tone. But he said, "It's like you're not playing the game. You should be on the line that you think is true. Like, what are you doing? You're messing this whole thing up." It seems. I mean, that was
that could be better. Yeah.
No, yeah.
But what do you think is true?
I do think America is racist. Yes.
Okay, so then why don't you move? Okay.
More has to do with it. I think it more has
That was not ideal.
No.
to do with intensity.
She was saying that initially she was uncertain and hadn't come to the end of like a full rational evaluation. And so she was hedging her bets. And he says, no, you have to be where you would be at the end of a long rational, but she hasn't had time, I think.
Yeah.
You could have said, oh, okay, so I understand at the beginning you weren't sure. Now, have you reconsidered? Would you like to move, or is that still the position that you think best fits where you're at on this?
Yeah,
point?
I think I'd invite. So by the end of this conversation, maybe you have room to move. We'll come back to you,
Or that, yeah.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, based on my past experience with talking with people out in public, I would just assume this is everyone's gut feeling, whatever line they're on, before we go into the reasons. Potentially.
It's not like you've prepared beforehand, is it?
Yeah.
This is just what people reckon in the moment, and
it's a random person doing this thing. It's not like we're expecting people to have well-researched arguments ready to go about this topic everywhere they go on campus. You know,
and there are lots of cameras about. People have got microphones. They're talking about contentious issues. Like, somebody being nervous in this context is that should be the reasonable expectation. So empathizing with that would be much better, I think.
True.
decision making. So
What do you mean?
So all of these are agree. It's just the intensity at which you would agree.
How about instead of intensity, confidence level, how confident one is? Is that fair?
Sure. I mean, confidence which creates intensity.
Okay, all right, fine. So
Either way.
you're on strongly agree because you're intense. You intensely feel? Was the word feel? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is
It's
it
an
think?
interesting criticism of the scale, though, isn't it? I mean, they all agree. It's just how passionate do you feel it? So strongly agreeing with something is not that you believe it with more certainty. It's just that you're very passionate in your belief that this is the case, which is not
true.
necessarily the same thing.
I am personally allergic to the word feel when it means think. That just makes me break out in weird itches and rashes. I just hate it, and it's a personal thing.
I think people often. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know how we can make the scale. What label should we use if we want to make it framed in like a thinking thing, a rational thing, rather than a feeling of agreement?
How certainty? I mean, that's How confident are you? Confidence is different from a level of agreement, right? And I think the standard confidence scale works pretty well, right? Because people can speak in absolute terms. Like this gentleman, I'm sure, if he was to say true or false, America is racist, and he says true, and then you say how confident are you, he'd be extremely. How certain are you? How strongly do you feel that? He would say very high. How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 100 that this is true? He may say like 80%, like 70%. It may be very different.
That's what I'm wondering. What do we label the lines? 100%?
Yeah.
75%? 66%? What is that?
You'd have to call the scale a confidence scale.
Get rid of specific numbers. All we care about is that there are lines and there is some possible distance between them.
I do like having labels for the lines.
Sure. But
if the label is one end is certainty and the other one is doubt, and then the middle ground is maybe like, unsure or something. Or,
you would not allow me to put sigma values on it because that's too complicated. It's going to mess with people's mind. I think putting numbers on it is going to take 30%, exactly 30% of your audience and lop them off for not working with the numbers.
Okay, something to think about.
We are this far away from saying that this line means the color mauve, and this is the smell of freshly laden grass, and this one is the song you first heard when you fell in love, and like you go where you feel, man, and it's like, well, what did you think that meant?
But when it comes to the difference between how confident you are that it's true and how strongly you feel about it, I think that one possible solution is that you could ask both questions. You could first ask, how important is this to you? How passionately do you feel about this issue? And then after that, say, okay, so how confident are you that it's actually true? Because if you ask about the confidence first and it's very important to them and they're very passionate about it, they might want to put that into their answer. So that's one option.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
What is it?
I mean, all the above. It's not a thing that I directly experience. I mean, obviously, as a white guy, I don't really experience racism on the day-to-day quite in the same way as a minority person. But
so you said the word systemic before. What is that the word you use, or is this system? What does that word mean?
I mean, it's the violence inherent within the system, to quote Monty Python.
Wins now. He wins the game.
Okay,
he
so give me an
Monty Python.
example.
Go ahead.
Just a win. Just a straight win now. That's
Monty
it.
Python.
He quoted Monty Python. Fantastic. American quoting Monty Python. This is staged. This is fake news. I don't believe it.
But I think he's also missing the point of that bit too, because I think there's something about that bit that is contrary to what I think the point was, that it was hard to define.
Yeah, the comedy from that bit is that modern day liberals like Monty Python are using modern day language and mental models to critique feudalism from the future. That's the comedy for me.
Yeah, the joke is that the guy is being annoying, and so the king Arthur is throttling him because he's being annoying, and he's claiming this is the violence inherent in the system, whereas it's actually just one guy reacting to one other guy. I guess the problem is going to be where they're going to run into, I'm sure, in the moment, what the definition of systemic anything is. What does system mean, and what is a systemic problem? What would it mean for a system to be racist? And there are good answers for that, but yeah, I think we're going to crash into that now.
Yeah.
Of a law currently on the books. Let me repeat that.
Let me go back.
It's the violence inherent within the system, to quote Monty Python.
So, so give me an example of a law currently on the books. Let me repeat.
He didn't say anything about laws, so that's putting words in his mouth.
Yeah, that was a very strange one. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe this is a thought experiment. I'm not sure.
Peter should ask, does the system mean the laws in the society? That should be the first question if he's going to ask the follow-up question of give me an example of a law.
Yeah.
Just ask what's the best example of systemic racism in America. I guess that's a question you could ask.
Yeah.
That. Give me an example of a law currently on the books that's racist.
It doesn't have to do with laws. It has to do with entrenched social movements.
Give me an example of something currently, like I'm not exactly sure what that means, but if it's systemic, to me, and maybe this is just my understanding, it would mean that there's something in the system, like that's the definition of systemic.
Like laws?
Well, that's what when I hear systemic, it's the first thing I think of.
Which is weird for Peter to say that. Doesn't he know where this comes from, this line of thought and the precedents for it?
He's not clarifying, is he? He's not like helping to come. He's not inviting the conversation partner to define it and then explain that they're rationalizing on the basis of their definition. And one other thing that he keeps doing, which I really wish he wouldn't doing, is he's not saying, could you give me an example? He's saying, give me an example. And it's such a small thing, but oh my God, like you just ask, could you give me an example of it? And also maybe it's better for Peter's trying to construct thought experiments or like examples, but he should be asking for examples. He should be asking for like, could you explain what you mean by this? Could you give an example of it? And I think,
he was this close to asking or to say something like, I'm still not entirely sure what you mean by systemic or the system. What is the system?
Right.
Instead, he said, I'm still not clear on what that is, but give me an example. And then he took a step back and said, actually, when I hear systemic, when I hear system, this is what I think about. And he explains to him what his understanding is, which shouldn't matter in this context.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Nathan says he wants to own the libs. I mean, kind of. It's not exactly libs. Like I would claim he's a liberal himself. I was on the store. I'm also a liberal. I want to expose wokeness, which is what this claim is sometimes talked about within that ideology. So, and we don't want to do it dishonestly. We don't want to straw man the claims and the arguments. We want to get real people who really believe this stuff with the best reasons they have. So it's hard.
This is the problem I have with it. Most of the time, I think Peter knows the position that he wants to argue with, and he's mining for it. He's not really finding people with that opinion. He's canvassing for the argument that he wants to have, and that feels like he's trying to draw it out of people rather than them actually offering it. And again, that makes it very much not an SE sort of approach, I'd say.
Yeah, we definitely had that claim on the board, invited people to talk about that specific thing.
Yeah, but the way he's framing his arguments, the way he's sort of giving his thought experiments, it's very much kind of trying to draw it out of them in a very specific framing, and it feels straw man-y.
I don't want to assume what exactly is going on in his mind here either, but it is very typical that when we're talking about like systemic racism, laws is the first thing that happens sometimes in those conversations, and then it becomes a matter of, okay, well, what law is racist? That's like the conversation. So that is interesting that's immediately where his mind went on that, was to immediately assume that system was the same as laws, because I think again that is where the conversation tends to go.
But the clarity could have been brought by, as Janosch was saying, what does it mean for a system to be racist? What would it look like for a system to be racist? Can we get to know what that means and then try and find an example external to the
Do you want an answer to that question?
Oh, I think I have answered to that question, but go ahead.
It would look like if I go to the DMV, they ask me what race I am.
Right.
Well, if someone already believes that the system is racist, then a better or another question would be, how would a system look that's not racist?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of pushback, and I know there's a side travel, but at a hospital that my wife works at, they are having a lot of trouble because their race pie chart is changing a lot because most of the white people check other or will not disclose or does not apply or whatever, and it's messing with their potential funding.
Oh, wow.
Oh, interesting.
Anyway, keep going.
Laws are one of the very few things that govern our behavior, or one of the many things, rather. Sorry.
yeah.
One
Okay.
of, so it's not just laws that determine whether we do something or not, and it also doesn't determine what's good in the world. So, like, you could say that it's all has to do with laws, but then you're kind of just degrading it to that single point. of
Okay,
how
that's
we
fair.
exist as
That's
humans.
fair. To give me an example of a system that's racist that in the is it in the United States? Yeah, in America.
A system that's racist.
Yeah.
Does he mean to
Sorry,
sound
I think the
begrudging when he said
specific
that
one,
was
big
fair?
time.
Like,
You can move, by the way. You can.
I don't know. This was his first talk, and maybe he was just waking up or something. I don't know.
wow, because he was like, "Oh, that's fair," like, oh my god, like even when he's not direct messaging, it's like even innocuous neutral words are direct messaging. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it's really unfortunate.
It was the same earlier with the scale. When this guy said, well, yes, it's about confidence, but then also about what passion or about how strongly I feel or something. And Peter went, okay, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I think that's bullshit, but let's talk about something else. That's how it came across, at least for me.
So dismissive.
Yeah.
And move to the strongly agree.
Unfortunate.
Oh, I thought you were going to move.
Oh, no, I was
You're
just
free
speaking
to
for him.
you're free to move anywhere you want. It's free country.
Well, I've particularly been studying gender relations at the moment.
But let's try to. I'm happy to do that claim
Well,
next.
no,
We
I
put
know,
that
I
on
know,
the-
I know, but it's the same sort of dichotomy. It's the same sort of
I think he tried there.
Power relation.
I didn't have too much of a problem with that. With
Mhm.
them saying like this, this is a topic. I'm wondering if we can stick to it.
Another thing that you'll notice, though, even though that may have been a less aggressive change, interruption, as it were, but you'll notice that when people are doing SE, so the classic SE, we if the interlocutor, your conversations partner, is speaking, you'd like never interrupt them. Like you very rarely would you want them to say what they're saying, get it out there without interruptions, without pressuring them. And then you respond to it once they've finished speaking. But this guy is getting like 5 words. So if I was this guy, I'd be getting quite frustrated just with the cadence of the conversation alone. And even before you get into the sort of nature of the topic, I mean, I'd imagine he's getting annoyed.
I agree. We should take our time, especially in this format.
in terms of gender as opposed to racism.
Yeah, but is it okay if we do racist? Because that's only the claim now. We'll talk about gender if you want to write another one on the board. But give me an example of a system of racism that we currently have in the country.
Give me again.
Right, current system of racism. It's like entrenched social patterns. So it's not so much laws or government or sort of formalized.
Yeah, we'll forget laws. We'll forget laws. Just give me a system.
It's more just how people act with each other. So like literally what she's described earlier, this sort of circumstance in which somebody
Her
would-
friends.
Yeah,
That-
it was circumstance in which somebody was supposed to have done something because of their skin color, because of internal assumptions that we have about particular people. That's the systemic. sort of
How is that systems in terms of just people? Maybe there were two just neo-Nazis or just weird, creepy people, or just. I mean, how is that a system?
Because we're in a system. Humans are systemic. So people, people cause
Humans are systemic. What do we think
Right.
he meant by that?
Can you
I think he meant
give me an
society.
example? Can you give an example
Yeah,
of,
that's what I
of,
think,
of
too.
racism that is not systemic? What is
Mm.
is there anything that is not systemic? That would be a good question. Like
The problem is if he defines humans, if humans equals systemic, and therefore any racism, therefore systemic racism. I mean,
except it's if it's from non-human animals, then it's maybe not.
but I don't think he's. But I think that's an unfortunate way he's thinking it through. Like I don't really think that's what he means, or I think he seems to be in real time trying to figure out what his position is. And part of the way Peter's approaching this is sort of operating on the assumption that they already have their opinion, and well thought out, and well articulable, and ready to go. And I think he's thinking it through. And so I don't think he's trying to create a straw man here. I don't think he's trying to create like a simple get out of jail semantics game here. I think he's genuinely trying to think it through.
Yeah, I think that the pacing, like you were saying earlier, the pacing is just pivotal to this, and it's not. I think I could be wrong because again, I'm not him, but he seems like a little nervous, and he's thinking of these things on the spot. Whereas if it was just the microphone was there and you just kind of let him look up and think about it a little bit and answer, you might get a much better thought out response. I do think when he's talking about preconceived notions that he thinks everybody has. If I had to guess, that's really what he's talking about, centered around race, and people making up the system are then those preconceived notions are kind of creating dynamics and so on and so forth. So if I was being charitable, I would guess that's what he's saying.
But part of the value of this exercise surely is invoking this person's opportunity to think about this thing. This is, it's certainly within SE, that's the whole purpose of the exercise, is to encourage the person you're speaking to think this through. Whereas, yeah.
Usually when there's someone inexperienced with SE and they ask me what they can do to try and get into SE, get into the mindset, just try it. Usually what I tell them is just start with mirroring. Just repeat what you understood the other person said. And I feel like in this situation, that would have helped with the pacing. That would have helped to slow everything down a little bit. That would have given the interlocutor the time to think it through and maybe say, yeah, actually, now that doesn't sound right. Now that you say it, now that you repeat it, I want to change what I said. Or not, but anyway, I feel like that would have helped. Simply learning to mirror the other person.
This is the problem with having more than one person at a time going on, though, because you can't give people the time. If he'd really taken the time to allow the first person to explain what they mean, explain their definitions, mirror their behavior, give them time to sort of be clear, that other person's waiting for a very long time. I'm already feeling like the more he's talking to the gentleman, the lady's getting bored and sort of not giving any attention to, and she's a bit confused about what to do with herself. So again, part of the sort of one-on-one mechanism that we have in SE is specifically to give the full attention to the one person so that they have time to do this sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, we also want to welcome Nathan, Digital Gnosis. He was in the chat. I invited him on. What's up, Nathan?
No mic, mate, Nathan. You could try it with a mic. We recommend it.
Hey, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
I was muted on the. I've got two mutes, right? The button and the one.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep going here. Feel free to jump in at any time. Anybody?
Systems. And systems cause people. You can't just look at it from the system causing people, but the people causing systems.
Okay, so if the same case of a black person going in a store and nobody approached them, the same argument that you just could be used to say that there's a system in place that does not discriminate against. So it would seem to be more than the behavior of people. So a system is a very specific claim. You're saying it's a system. Like, give me an example of a system.
She's describing one from the outside.
So first, I do want to say that I do feel like this is I know a lot of people try to say factually America's racist. In my opinion, I do think the phrase America's racist is an opinion. I don't know if that stems from me not liking conflict. But I just want to say first that this is my opinion. Like, I don't have the factual evidence to back it up and say it's a fact.
Okay, let's
So
pause on
maybe
that.
just to pause there, right? You can see how for most people, a lot of these sort of words are just very confusing. Like opinion, fact, and stuff, things like that. I mean, it's like, right, well, if it's your opinion, then you think it's a fact, right? But I mean, you can't be aggressive with most ordinary people because they just haven't thought about things in this way. And so it's going to kind of, put them on the back foot when they're kind of confused anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think this lady is also really giving voice to a position that Peter should be empathizing with, which is, they're putting themselves out there. They're trying to express these views. They're trying to figure it out. She's she's caveating now what she's saying. She's she's trying to say that I don't really know, like I'm figuring this out, and like I really wish Peter was more receptive to that sentiment.
Yeah, and to Steelman, the critical race theory claim, he just claimed that she was describing the system from the outside or something. It's like he's saying this particular anecdote of this person being followed in a grocery store or convenience store is an example of a system of white supremacy in society that oppresses certain people. So that's one example of a system that he's trying to clarify.
Well, I don't think he said white supremacy, did he? Like, I think he's saying it's an example of systemic racism, but that's not the same as a white supremacy narrative, is it necessarily?
Yeah, I think that goes again into the issue with definitions. Like even saying America is racist, like you could agree with it on 100 poetic levels, but when we're talking about literally, like obviously the land isn't. That's not what we're talking about. So, yeah, and I think the same thing goes. I'll hear the same phrase like America is white supremacist, and we can get into the details and stuff, but the definitions are just really going to matter there. Whereas if it was longer, the definitions matter a little less.
Which doesn't mean most people are KKK members. It means something more broad.
Right. Yeah. And this is why I was saying at the beginning, it's like America is racist. Does that mean there's one racist person in America? Does that mean that all of Americans are racist? Does it mean that, what is America unique in being racist in some way? Is it?
There's a person named America and they're racist. And that's
I just wanted to come back to the part where it's difficult to have more than one interlocutor. I feel like with this last thing that the woman said, that
it's not a fact, it's an opinion.
Yeah, it's their opinion. Usually, what you would have to do is talk about what is opinion, what is truth, what is a fact. Can an opinion be wrong, etc. But you don't want to do that and dive into that with another person wanting to talk about the claim standing right next to you. So, just not an ideal situation for a C.
Normally, I think when we describe something as an opinion and not just claim it to be true, we're just expressing our uncertainty about it. We're just saying we're not super confident in this, and that it's just you recognize other people hold a different view, and you don't understand that. That's what we normally, I think, mean by an opinion.
It's not as reconcilable. Yeah.
No.
Well, sometimes it means, well, you have your opinion, I have my opinion. Let's just leave it at that, where everyone has their opinion, and in these cases, what I often understand is what they're saying is there is no truth, there's no right or wrong. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. No, let's just leave it at that.
Sometimes, but yeah, I do think like the idea that this is just my opinion is expressing like that I'm showing my working here. Like I'm showing my current thinking on this. It's not like a fully fledged out. That can transition into everybody has their own opinion, so nothing's true, to everybody has their own truths, which we've encountered. Like that's kind of the progenitor of that mindset of saying you've got your truth, I've got my truth. That we all have our own truth, which is a very different type of statement.
Yeah. The just. You're right. The just there is important. There's I think it's the New York Times, but they have a fact versus opinion quiz, and if you take that quiz, and I take it like with my classes, some of them are really easy, but at some point the students start to become confused because it seems like an intermingling of fact and opinion. And so I think that shows that things can be, when it comes to fact and opinions, the muddies can be watered, or the waters can be muddy.
I think it's a useful mental model here, though, isn't it? Because like we can't, like, and this is sort of philosophy, right? But like we can't really know true total facts. We can have just things that we're highly confident in, and we can have more or less reasons to be justified in that confidence. But we never really know certain truths, right? This is the brain in the vat, et cetera, experiments, right? This is pretty established, and so all of our mental models for how we understand the world are varying degrees of confidence. So if this lady's never really spoken about this or never thought about this deeply, which this entire exercise is designed to encourage her to do, which is a good thing, to encourage people to think about things, especially things that are important to society, then it's very likely that she's working on a mental model of whether America's racist or not that is not fully formed and not fully fleshed out, and that's fine. That's totally valid. So I think everything is on a continuum to something we would claim to be an opinion and something we would claim to be true.
Yep.
Good discussion on that. Should we keep going? We'll come back to this maybe.
Just a quick point was just to say, I think the reason, and I could be wrong, why she feels the need to mention this is perhaps because of Peter's questioning might feel kind of aggressive as well. So she wants to kind of make it clear that she's just making this modest claim that's just an opinion, right? I'm not saying it's a fact, and I think that might be the reason why she's saying that is trying to navigate the conversation rather than because it's like something she's really thought about, like this distinction between facts and opinions, and she's now she really wants to defend it's an opinion rather than a fact.
Which she represented well because she started on slightly agree, and then Peter moved her to agree. I think that's
he told her
off. Yeah. All right, here we go.
But I just want to say first that this is my opinion. Like, I don't have the factual evidence to back it up and say it's a fact.
Okay, let's pause on that. So when I say America's racist, the claim is that true? Do you agree that that's true?
I do agree that it's true. Yes.
Okay, so we're not talking about an opinion. We're talking about something that's a claim that hooks to reality in a lawful way.
Okay. So, and then again,
you can have opinions about those claims, empirical claims. That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway.
this is just what I have been a part of. I have a friend who is Hispanic, and I had gotten into a verbal fight with someone. I think this was last year.
Is this an example of a system?
System, yes.
Okay, great.
I am going to bring up, and I don't know if it's racist or if it's just prejudice.
Okay.
But the police force in Eugene, just because, actually I think it was Springfield. I believe it was Springfield. We were in that area. And I had gotten into a verbal fight with someone who was catcalling. There was something thrown.
They're catcalling you?
Yes. Someone, there was things that had been thrown. It was on the street and the police were called. Right away, my friend who was Hispanic tried to explain to them what was happening, and they assumed, again, that she was the one who had started the fight. They told her to shut up. They told her to be quiet.
How do you know that it was because of her skin color? What did they tell you? Like your friend, your other friend, you're black, they told her. How do you know it's because of her skin color?
Again, I can't specifically say that they did it because of her skin color, but they did tell her straight up, we know you started this fight. They said that directly to her. The other person was white. I was white. It's just kind of the feeling you got, and also everything that had been going on already with the Springfield police.
So you're saying that there's a culture.
So firstly, there's that. How do you know? Again, is a really unnecessarily aggressive way to say that. You could just say, are there other reasons that they might have approached your friend other than her skin color? Like, even if you aren't aware of them, could we imagine that there might be other reasons? Like that would be a much better way of asking that question. And he literally just said, so you are saying, which is, an absolutely monstrously bad thing to say in a conversation like this. Always better to say, I think I hear you saying, or something like that. But
that should come first. Am I understanding you correctly that you believe, or that is your assumption that her skin color was the reason, etc. And after that, could there be another reason? Yeah.
Yeah.
What she's saying isn't necessarily indefensible, right? I mean, there are reasons to doubt it. Maybe she should, but it's like that's going to depend on the kind of skill of the debater, almost, right? Which shouldn't because you could have a skilled debater who would say, okay, look, we've got two models here, right? One on which the people are racist, one on which they're not. Which of these best fits kind of like their behaviors that they had, and then you could go about it like that, and it's a completely different type of conversation. Yeah. But I just think it's, and you don't want to make it about the person's capacity to debate or kind of name, logical buzzwords, whatever you want to.
Right.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting to me is that, like, I think one of the things, obviously, people have talked about Peter having an agenda here, but I think it could be helpful to his position if he was creating more nuance here. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to even do that here, and he's not doing that. Like, does this instance prove, like, is there a chance that this is a one-off? Or there's lots of questions that he could ask that would create a lot of nuance here, and that's he doesn't sound not neutral. He sounds like I don't think if he had a right-wing agenda here, I don't think he would be asking these questions much differently. Like, and I'm not saying that he does. I'm just saying I don't know that I could tell the difference between, because of what he's asking. It feels like he's much more likely to be coming from the right here than the left, for sure.
And I usually like SE. One of the things that I think we can say is usually a good sign of an SE conversation is that your conversation partner can't really tell where you are, because you want that neutrality. It's really important for the conversation, so that the conversation can go where it needs to without preconceptions about, having to fight against the other person's perspective. But yeah, I could totally understand if somebody thought that Peter was right wing and was watching this, they wouldn't find anything to dissuade them of that perspective, I think.
Yep. Here we go.
Or within the police department, is that what you mean by system culture?
It can be. So like culture, or the way we act, sort of determines what the system is or what laws are, which you seem to be hung up on. Like
I threw the laws out the window. I'm just trying to figure out what the
I mean,
definition of a system is.
You also can't throw it out. It's just a matter of
Okay,
direction.
we'll bracket it, but I'm trying to figure out when someone says a systemic thing. She did not say that. You said that. I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that, because I am not clear.
Well, I mean, she brought up, for example, the police. It's not that they have laws that direct them to be racist. It's that internally, somehow, people are racist, which determines behavior in any given circumstance. Like, if a police stops a white person, they're less likely to arrest them than with a black person. So you might call it even individual, but everybody does it.
Okay, so I'm
in that
trying to
way, it's
figure out.
systemic.
So let's say that we have a police force in whatever city she's from. I can't remember what she said, someplace in Oregon.
Oh, this was in Springfield.
Okay, but let's just pretend that it's someplace, some weird place that nobody ever goes to that has a population of like 10,000. And let's say that every single person who applies to the police force there is some kind of closeted Klansman. So they're a member of the Klan, but they don't let anybody know they're a member of the Klan. Run with me with the thought experiment. I'm trying to figure out what the word system means. Sure. And they all go and decide that they're going to become police officers. They go through training. They all become cops. Is it then fair to say that is that what you mean by the system being racist? It's populated by people who hold racist. Is that what I'm trying to figure out what the word means?
Okay, so it's populated by people who are racist, yes.
Okay.
But also they're not exceptional. Like, they're not members of the KKK, they're just people.
Okay.
And people are generally, Americans specifically, are racist. Because your little America is racist, better question is Americans are racist.
Okay, but that's a different claim.
It's the same claim.
I would want to know, what does he mean by racist?
We want to know that the landmass has very specifically negative views about certain people. That's what we need to want.
So
I think we're getting closer, though. I think we're getting somewhere, actually. Now.
I think that thought experiment helped attempt to clarify a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't
Well,
like
clarifies how he's how he's understood the question, though, as well, which I think is important for engaging with his claim.
Dude with glasses gets at least 1 extra point from me for finding the moderate position and being clear. He also already has 3 extra points with me for his hair.
Yeah, hair's on point.
America's constitutive of its part.
Just a second. With this thought experiment, I feel like a good last question, like after presenting the thought experiment, would have been something along the lines of, how would this police force in that place be visibly different from a systemically police force somewhere else that does not only consist of Klansmen?
But I also want to. I think I'd also like to explore, because the way he seems to be going is that everybody's racist.
Right.
Like that seems to be where this is going, and like so it'd be really interesting to know if he believed that there was anybody who wasn't racist.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, and if it is the case that everybody's racist, then and humans create systems, then all systems are intrinsically racist. Like.
Well, he did also say it's. I liked when he said that it's not exceptional. Like, that seemed to be a very clear. That's much more clarifying of his position at that point. And to me, the not exceptional may include. He might have used that word instead of saying everybody is racist for a specific reason. But I mean, you could still clarify it.
Yeah, I thought that was a response as well to the Klansman, because that seemed to be unnecessarily pushing a specific narrative as opposed to just be talking about racism. And now he's talking about actually you have to be a Klansman, otherwise that means you're not racist. It's
That's
like,
the only way to be
yeah.
racist. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as has been mentioned already, you know, both the words, right, systematic and racism are kind of murky about what they mean. And that's not to say that, you know, through some process of trying to get clear about them, there is going to be some kind of, you know, some kind of essence we uncover, because maybe that's just how they're used in the world in a murky way. But I think that something, as you see people investigate these claims, and this would apply maybe to ourselves as well as the people being interviewed here, you know, there's a tendency to think about racism as if it's a property that attaches to someone's like essence or something, like, you know, they've got an inner soul or something, and then it's either racist or it's not, rather than, you know, racism maybe being a kind of complicated set of behaviors that maybe sometimes, you know, maybe someone at a time is racist, maybe at a time they're not, and that kind of guides the way that then these questions are answered about whether, you know, people are racist or are people not racist.
Well, yeah, racist is a label we apply to other people. Really, it's not an intrinsic property of them. It's a property that somebody else has ascribed to you, and that comes with issues. What's really concerning about this is the concept of America has become a murky term. You know, as if things weren't already bad enough. Like that's the alarming place for it right now. He's now saying we can't say Americans are racist. We have to say America is racist. And I don't know why he wanted to I would have thought reframing it as Americans was a perfectly legitimate place to go. But now apparently we have to talk about the landmass or the national entity.
And I think another place that, again, that we could go that would show the difficulties here is to even start with the word race. Like, what is race can, I think, reveal a lot of difficulties. Because if you're having, I think you can define race, but if you're having some difficulties here and there defining race, that can then lead into understanding issues with the idea of defining racism.
Yeah.
True. All right, here we go.
Racist. Better question is, Americans are racist.
Okay, but that's a different claim.
It's the same claim. America is constitutive of its parts, which is Americans.
I'm 100% happy to do the gender thing next, and Americans are racist.
Is that a composition division fallacy?
So I think he's sort of right, because in the sense that the question is asking about America, right? It is like an abstract entity, like America, and then like the predicate of it is racist or something, right? Whereas Americans are the people who are like in America, right? And that's of whom you want to ask, you know, are they racist? But
the people who participate in this game, they have an understand. They read that. They have an understanding of what it means, and based on their understanding of what it means, they choose where to put themselves on the scale, and then they talk about that belief. They're not, and that claim, they're not talking about the claim according to the definitions that Peter is using. So I think, where is, like, what's the purpose of this? Is this to understand this guy's position, or these two people's positions, or is that because he's just saying, if you're not using my definitions, then you're not playing the game right?
It doesn't make any sense. If you created a country with nobody in it, it wouldn't have, you know, you couldn't say it was racist or non-racist. It would have to be neutral. And the fact that there are people in it is what makes it racist or non-racist. Because you're not, when you say America, you're talking about American people.
Well, or you could be talking about the legislation and
sure.
Institutions, the buildings,
institutions and buildings.
And I would argue that institutions and legislation, of course, that all goes back to people, but it's also different from just the people or the group of all people.
I think that's what's misleading from the start, though, possibly, because it's already like the most reified abstract concept it could be. America, right? It's like a bunch of whatever connotations you've got about American culture and stuff, but devoid of any like concrete, any kind of concrete context, right? Just a bunch of associations and things in the abstract.
Yeah, if you were going to play Pictionary, how would you write America with Pictionary? You know, pictures and stuff. Yeah, maybe that would help. Like, I would get the bald eagle, flag.
Racism.
Big white hoods.
Actually, that's a good question. Would some people write depict slaves.
Well, that's what I mean,
No.
right? In the abstract, it's like everything's up for grabs.
No,
Or we
because
just
that,
try to
that
pay
wouldn't be
Americans.
specific. That wouldn't be
but in it-
specific. Oh, well, maybe that one.
But in an interesting way, like the initial example we had of America being racist was what two people did in a department store to one black person. And now we've abstracted this up to the entire, and from that we got the entire system of America, not the system of America, but just concept of America was racist. You know, that's just a massive extrapolation, right? And I think, just as we said before, that if people were acting in that way in that store, we could say that the people in that store were racist. They were motivated in their actions based on the racial profile of the individual. And if you say that there is a law in a particular institution in America, you can say that that institution is racist. When do you get to the point where you say the entity of America is racist? Like, when does if 50% of the population are racist, does that mean the country? You can say the country is racist. That might be fine, but again, this is where I was really worried this was going to get to, because it's not a very well worded claim, and it's provided by Peter.
I disagree. I think it's not a bad thing that it's this abstract. It's okay to have a claim if you are the one presenting the claim and you're not asking for your interlocutor to choose a claim. Then it's perfectly fine to make it very abstract and then ask them to explain what they mean and use their definitions and base the entire conversation, the entire interview on what they understand what it means.
Which he
Peter
doesn't
isn't
willing
doing
to
that
do
in this case,
exactly.
Right. That's what he's not.
Yeah.
That's what he's not doing. But I don't think
I agree.
that the problem lies with the phrasing of the claim. It lies with the way that Peter is using the wording of the claim to kind of like put the conversation in the box or try to contain it inside of a box that he thinks this.
Yeah,
this
it's
should be
like,
about.
how big is this whiteboard we're talking about here? And then how specific are we going to get? And how small is the lettering going to get until people are just walking by this thing because they're not going to read it?
And I would agree with all of that if it was a conversation between two people. Like if he had on the board, America's racist, come talk to me about it, and then he had a one-to-one conversation with somebody where the conversation could go where it needed, they could define the terms as they went along, that would be fine. But the fact that he's now trying to do this simultaneously with two people with such an ambiguously worded claim, I think is partly why this doesn't feel like it's going anywhere interesting or useful.
So I think it's a good idea to clarify terms if we have ambiguous claims before you ask them to move. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, I like Quayd's idea of, like, at the beginning, just everybody get together and decide as a group. You know, if you're going to do this as a group, then you need to decide what we mean by the claim in the first place. Does everybody agree the definitions of what we're saying, and then go to the spaces? I think that would feel a little bit.
I don't even think you have to agree on the definitions, but I think it should be an open conversation, and everybody should have some idea of what's meant.
For this particular exercise, we mean this by this word.
Yeah, because if you try and get everyone to agree, I mean, that's how you sort of start an ancient school of philosophy, right? And then you get people saying, you know, humans are what's it, featherless bipeds, and then someone turns up with a plucked chicken the next day, and so on.
All right, here we go.
But you stood on the strongly agree line, so you must strongly agree unless you stood on the wrong line. You're free to move to agree or anywhere in the line you want. I'm trying to, and I don't mean to linger on this necessarily, but I think it's so important to understand what you mean when you say it's a system.
Okay. All right. It's a system.
That's why I was saying the examples, like if
Give him time to think.
He doesn't want. It's like nails on a
Embrace the
chalkboard.
pause. Embrace the pause.
But the thing is,
Okay,
I
so-
think the systemic racism thing is the thing that Peter wants to talk about. It's the thing that he wants to have. It's the talking point, right? And he should have just put that, like, systemic racism as a thing discussed, because that's clearly what Peter's up for. And I don't think any of the objections about redefining America as Americans were dismissible, except for the fact they weren't getting Peter to his chosen topic, which is not the one he, for some reason, wrote on the board. It would have just been better if he said systemic racism is a thing, discuss.
Or put up a table and say systemic racism doesn't exist. Change my mind.
Yeah, just do it that way.
As a format.
let's say they're not KKK members. Let's say that they're harboring some animus against black people, and they all decide to become cops. Does that mean that the system is acting against black people, or individuals within the system? Because that's an extremely crucial distinction.
Is it?
Okay. So
I think that would be
individuals
the composition division fallacy, right? Because it's not like the system exists in, and this is the problem with our language in talking about the abstract things, right? Like, is America racist, right? But it's not like America is something over and above all of the people who make it up or whatever, but we just need some terms so we can usefully talk about things at a particular scale, because, you know, it would be impossible to sort of go, right, and John and Tom and Sally and you know, like, in all their belief, and list all their beliefs and name all the constituent parts at some lower level.
Yeah, I think this is. I mean, this is clearly where he wanted to have the conversation. So I think the idea that all of the police officers are racist, but the institution of the police station or the police in general is not racist, can be valid. Like the institution, I think, being racist would be that they had explicitly stated policies and procedures that targeted minorities. That would make the institution racist. That doesn't. I mean, the net impact of it though would be, you know, you've got a bunch of racist police officers that were clearly doing terrible things to the communities, right? So this is not ideal. And the institution itself not being racist is no protection from the terrible things that can happen. But I think for it to be institutional racism, there has to be process and policy embedded in the institution itself.
Well, it can be policies that are explicitly phrased in a way that they're racist, and they can also just work in racist ways.
Yeah,
and
of course.
sometimes intentionally, sometimes even unintentionally, but they can have the effect and still be racist. That's how I would view it. But
yeah, the policy doesn't have to mention a race in order to be a racist policy, for sure.
Yeah.
How about this thought experiment for this claim? You just, like, everyone in the South right now magically time travels back to America in like 1850, where all of the institutions and procedures and laws are the way they were back then. But everyone has modern day prejudices or like non-prejudices for each other. So if they just started to live their lives with all the institutions and laws in that society, I would assume they would want to start changing the laws of their areas, of their states and counties and of the entire America to make it resemble what it is today.
I think I think the person who thinks that America still is racist could say, like, you're right that there's a movement in the right direction still, but still consistently, but it is, you know, like, to a degree still too racist or something. Like it could be less so.
Yeah, I might also push back a little bit on the idea that there has to be something like with the system itself, because, like, for instance, if there are laws that they're not explicitly mentioning race, but they're working in racist ways and nobody's changing those things, I think that has to be considered too. If it's resulting in things that are harming minority groups and nobody's doing anything or seems to care about changing that, why is that not racist? I guess would be a critical question I would ask in that circumstance. If it's effectively doing some of the same things.
We are now shifting away from reviewing the SE
I know,
and discussing the issue.
This is more fun.
Just to say one thing that's actually one of the well-evidenced claims about sort of like racial prejudice is the one to do with like hiring decisions based on ethnic names. So CVs getting rejected by companies based off of whether the person has like an ethnic name on the CV or a kind of traditionally European name on the CV. And I think that could be something useful to introduce in like the thought experiment about the police department as well, right? Because you can think, well, or there might not be any kind of racist policies explicitly on the police department's books, right? But then you'd have to look at how they actually behave in order to because maybe they do like have prejudices against who they hire, for example. I mean, that would be an example of racism. Does that make them systematically racist? Does that,
like, you could implement a policy in which police officers in a certain area have to spend a certain amount of time in certain neighborhood and like spread out in different neighborhoods. But if you don't have that, and you know that police officers are choosing to spend time in minority neighborhoods, and you're not doing anything about that, I think that's where I start to you know, that what's the difference there that's significant and is making that not racism.
And that specific point gets brought up in a video that's going to be out on Tuesday, where the claim is the consideration of race should be removed from the college admissions process. So stay tuned for that. That'll be good.
That would see actually when they were talking about examples of a racist policy or an institutional racism, that would be an example, right? That's an example of an institution adopting a policy which behaves differently depending on your racial demographic, and you know that's a clear example that it's proud of, as it were. Yeah.
All right, well, let's keep going.
In the system that are not exceptional, so they constitute the system. So, like, it's not members of the KKK that are joining the police because they're racist or whatever.
They constitute the personnel who are members of the system, but they are not the system.
Yeah, but they are. So, like, anybody who is a police officer is a small, very small, infinitesimally small part of a larger whole. But
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
I agree. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we're on the same page now. Translate.
Are you?
I doubt it so hard.
I don't know if you are.
And even if you were, you shouldn't state it.
It's like up until now
I know,
I've had
like,
no idea what you've been talking about, but now I've just figured it out.
Yeah, it's not about being on the same page. It's understanding what they're saying and what their argument is.
I'm not playing that game. No way.
I was literally just
We do
thinking
not
that exact
recommend
thing.
drinking games with that team.
I know.
And even the body language is quite aggressive, and you know, like all this.
Exactly. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
To me, how that makes the system racist.
Because people make up the system. So people make the system, like laws, literally any, like.
Okay, so a part
we
of
are
the
as
system is racist, and this we don't have to use the example. Just throwing that example. A part of that system is racist, but that doesn't mean that the personnel in the system. But that doesn't mean that the system itself is.
Well, I think that.
Am I missing something?
No,
I'm
no,
probably
no,
missing something.
I don't think you're missing anything. This is also this is another opinion. I believe for me, I believe that there's a difference between.
So it looks
the
like the other
system
guy
that's been
feels a bit
created.
like, where have you gone? You know, like he was just in the middle.
I know.
The disagreement just kind of started, and then Peter was like, "So," and then it's like,
And he goes, Peter looked genuinely confused, didn't know what he was thinking. It was like he was suffering from like this cognitive dissonance, aporia, whatever it was. And then he ran to the other woman, and now this guy's continuing his sobriety test. I don't know why he thinks he's so drunk, but
Yeah.
And what the system was based on. So, like, the idea that came before the creation of the system.
Right, and I think what he's saying is that people participate in a culture.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I honestly think that the system is racist only because.
What?
it's just that's an even worse example than like. So you're saying it's now. So what he's saying is. I mean, it's like when he's talking to the one person, the other person is both present in the conversation, but also not in a way that I just think it's just designed to create this really awkward dynamic. It just doesn't feel like a conversation's growing.
Yeah. As the commenter said, though, Peter's now arguing he's arguing the other guy's claim with the woman who didn't necessarily hold the same claim or as strongly, even if it is the same claim.
Such a dangerous move. Like if yeah.
Within those few.
Well, how come you're not over there then?
Just because I do think, for me, I've only seen it situational. I haven't seen the bigger picture. I haven't been hounded or oppressed or just like nothing's happened to me. I've only seen it like through my eyes from someone else being. I just feel like
I got that.
I feel like
So
I need
if
more
the point of
facts
the-
and more.
If the point of the SE conversation is to like de-radicalize people, so far Peter has taken this woman from a moderate stance further and further.
At the far end of the line, there's just somebody standing there with Antifa sign-up forms. Just you can register here.
Yeah.
Need more facts and more to know more what to say before I would be able to go to strongly agree. I'm
Okay,
not
that's
ready.
fair. No, that's the most reasonable thing I've heard. Okay, so what would it take you?
because it's all been nonsense other than that.
You to move from
Oh
strongly agree
God.
to agree. What would you have to learn, figure out here? So sorry about that. What would it take for you to move
The
from
guy's not even
strongly
flinching.
agree
He's
to
just
agree?
looking at Peter trouncing his book. Just like, yeah, you might as well. Why not? I mean, you've just dismissed everything I've said as garbage. I don't even know if you have been listening. And now
It's the
you're
perfect symbol of what's happening. Stepping on that book.
Oh man.
I don't think I would.
So what evidence would you have to hear? What reason would you have to hear? What argument would you have to see to persuade you?
I see no point in being in agree or slightly agree. I'm either going to be in strongly agree or strongly disagree.
I followed you up
He
into the
merely
very end.
lacks a belief in
nuance.
Yeah.
That's an interesting, well, maybe not claim. Well, you could phrase it as a claim to investigate in a different conversation. It doesn't make sense to just slightly agree or agree.
I would agree with him for any empirical claim about the world. I would want to be on strongly disagree or strongly agree. Eventually, I'd like to have the inquiry result in most people being able to be on one side or the other to actually know if, being on the strongly agree if it's true or strongly disagree if it's false.
Yeah.
You would try and get there.
Yeah, we try to get there. It doesn't mean we're there yet.
It doesn't make sense to be there for every single claim that there is.
But I
I'm
do
still
feel
pretending I would need a whole stack of definitions before I could get to the edges.
I think we're conflating like conviction versus confidence. Like I think it's useful to act with conviction in the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're 100% confident that everything you know is certainly true. It's just that you're going to act with conviction until somebody comes along and gives you evidence in the other direction.
Oh, you think even if you only have very slight confidence that it's true, you have to act strongly and with strong conviction?
Yeah, it's essentially you've got two doors and behind one of them's a prize. You're only 10% confident that the one on the right is the correct one, and you're 20% confident that it's the one on the left. You're going to go to the one on the left. You're going to act in a total affirmative because you're making a binary decision to act in the affirmative for that door, even though you're confident that it's the correct door.
You've got a
forced
choice there, right?
Do you see any potential problems with that stance, William?
Do I see potential problems with that?
Yeah, potential danger.
I do now because Juggling Lessons is nodding profusely, which makes me very nervous about.
I guess we call those choices gambling. Yeah.
Oh,
yes. What's the? I think I missed the question. Is the question what would move him at this point?
Yeah, what reasons could you kind of find that would kind of move you towards a more moderate kind of affirmation of this claim?
Okay. Which would have been a good question to ask early on as well. But part of the problem with the two-person dynamic is that it's very difficult to maintain like a bookmark mentally with where he was with the conversation with this guy, because they were in the middle of quite a sort of combative sort of discussion about what it meant for components of a system being racist and the whole thing being racist. And he ran over there, and now he's back and he's picking it up in a completely different place. And like when he's talking to somebody else, the person he was just talking to, I'm not sure if he thinks that they're still involved or listening or participating in the conversation, whether they think they should be or not. Like it's really unclear about what their relationship to the conversation that doesn't directly involve them should be. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't have a microphone, they can't add to the dialogue, and so they sort of just
they're like literally pawns in a game.
yeah, they're in this weird limbo space where they can't do anything.
All right, here we go.
Agree or strongly disagree.
I followed you up into the very end. Why? I was right up. I tracked the whole thing you said up until the why.
If somebody convinced me that America is not
That's
racist.
the question.
What?
Why? You go like, can you stand somewhere on this scale about this claim, and then you just go up to them one by one. Why?
Maybe he should just grab him and shake him next. Why?
Yeah, you're tearing me apart, Eileen.
All right, here we go.
Then I would be in strongly disagree. I would not. There's no like gradient to me.
Well, what if someone convinced you, like she said, that there are a non-trivial number of people harboring racist attitudes, and that I could show you examples of redlining and lack of equity and equitable distribution in schools and poor people in black neighborhoods going to worse schools? Like, if I could show you statistics of black people being pulled over by the police but disproportionate rates?
Here's the argument I wish you'd made. So
well, hang on.
let me
Here's
hand
like
you the
10
script.
great claims. He needs to focus on, slow it down on one of those, I think, and just say, in a more neutral way, like, do you think if you found out that, and then one of those claims maybe, that less black people were pulled over by the police than white people, would that shift you a little bit in that direction? And
he needed them to make that claim though. Like you can't just say, here's all the talking points you probably think are true, but for some annoying reason you haven't said yet. So I'm going to just say them all in a big blurb, and like you can't.
That's a great point. Yeah.
At least wait until they say, I can't think of anything. Then offer something.
Oh, here's an example I've heard people say. Would you agree with this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to see this. I got to see this like redone, or Peter doing this again, but like he can't talk for like 30 seconds. Like he has to ask a question and allow a certain time of response, because I think that would. I'm not joking. I think it would change the whole conversation.
Yeah.
And what if he gave the interlocutor the microphone, the conversation partner? What if he handed the conversation partner the microphone?
And
we are
on top of that,
so uncontrolled. I like
we
it.
are shooting some more next week in some unspecified location. So I will take all this feedback and we'll
and practice mirroring. I think just that single point would make a huge difference for him to just repeat back what he understood.
And one of the things about this method, this process, is that it's performative. Like we talked about hard and soft SE, and one of the components about sort of the hard SE narrative is that it's somewhat more for the benefit of the audience than the conversation partner. And I'm wondering whether he's seeing like a pause in the conversation rather than a moment of reflection in the person you're speaking to, as almost akin to dead air in the video.
I agree. That shouldn't be the priority.
Which is
prioritize
really bad.
The people there you're talking to. Who cares what the audience thinks?
Exactly. Have a good conversation, and because you want the magic of SE is when the person you're speaking to is honestly reflecting and seeing something that they hadn't seen before. That's the beautiful moment. And he's just shutting down any opportunity for that to happen, because I think he's performing, filling the dead air, conscious of the performance.
I wonder if too, because we've talked before in SE about like the importance of respecting the other person's time. I don't know what's really going on here, but that could be a conflicting message where we're saying respect the IL's time, but also pace yourself. That's a hard thing to learn to do when you got a timer staring you in the face, but you have to pace things.
That's a really good point. I've definitely seen a few of these end with the person just walking off, not being able to say goodbye even, but just because Peter's talking to somebody at the other end of the spectrum, that somebody's just like wandered off as I've got to go. Sorry, I've just been here for like 20 minutes and you've been talking to other people. I've had 3 words and you've misunderstood 3 of them. And it seems like it's not very respectful of the conversation partner's time.
Yeah, here we go.
Hope the statistics of it.
But I just don't understand. So what evidence would it take you to move to strongly disagree? What would you have to be shown?
That America is not racist.
Okay, and what would that look like? What data set would that look like?
I have no idea, because I don't agree with it. Like, how would I know? Or else I would be over there.
Well, wouldn't you have to know the conditions under which your belief could be false to justify your confidence in the belief?
He's not demonstrated they've not gotten to the reasons why he thinks his position is true. At no point have they've talked about what it means, and they've argued about definitions, but at no point do I think he said, I think America is racist because of this, and this is my reasons that I think it supports my confidence. I don't think we've gotten to that. So now he's asking, what would you have to see to change? What would you have to find out to change your confidence? But
I think he knows he's only going to have a certain amount of time to talk now. So he's just kind of going with the first thing that comes in his head, and that's causing a problem with getting to the actual reasons.
Yeah. He's going through the motions a little bit now.
Let me back up a second and listen to that again. Hang on.
I have no idea, because I don't agree with it. like, how would I know? Or else I would be over there.
Well, wouldn't you have to know the conditions under which your belief could be false to justify your confidence in the belief?
That is an extremely sophisticated, like scientific falsifiability type idea that most people don't understand, like the true gravity of what that means. Like attempting to falsify your hypotheses should be the thing, and failing to falsify them should be the things that gives you confidence in a proposition or a hypothesis. That's
It's
not
also-
what people think about when they try to justify their beliefs. Usually,
It was a very, I mean, as a bit of a philosophy note, it was like a very verificationist way, and people use verificationism as a strawman, right? But that specifically was a very verificationist way of like what your experience would have to be in order for it to be false, right? That, I mean, and there are claims like, for example, I exist, for example, right? So what would my experience have to be for that claim to be false? Okay, and I mean, technically, it's a bit of a get out, but I agree with you. It's a bit too technical, and maybe it's a good heuristic for a whole bunch of claims, but it's not going to be helpful with this guy here, I don't think.
It usually does, though, fits in with the SE approach, because normally he's talked about the reasons he's confident that the position is true. He hasn't done this. He hasn't really provided evidence. They've just been mostly talking about definitions and what it means to be systemically racist. None of it is talked about why he personally believes there are systemically racist institutions in America. They've just been mostly arguing about what that means. So I don't think he's in the mindset of saying, well, okay, if this was sufficient evidence to get you into the position you are in, what would be sufficient evidence to change your view? What would you have to discover about the evidence that you believe is getting you here to in order to inform your opinion? And normally it works pretty well in a casual SE conversation, but he hasn't built that. He hasn't built that sort of mental conversational structure, so he can't sort of rely upon it to sort of help inform what this question's getting him to.
It does seem like this is a problem for this guy's thinking, though, because he could simultaneously strongly believe it and also sort of think there could be some evidence against it. So I do think that there's like an issue in this vicinity, but I don't think that issue is going to get brought to the forefront and kind of get this guy thinking about it because of how the conversation.
I think it depends on how you ask the question. I don't think, of course, if you have identified the reasons why someone believes it's true, that makes it easier to then identify reasons that could hypothetically get them to doubt that it's true. However, if you don't know the reasons, you could still ask, so what would be something that could move you in the opposite direction? They say, I have no idea. You can still ask something along the lines of, so hypothetically, if you were mistaken, is it possible that you would never be able to find out that you're mistaken because you can't even imagine any way that anything that could move you in the opposite direction? So I think if you phrase it just a little bit differently, and it's basically saying the same thing as Peter said, like, wouldn't you need to know what the reasons that would move you to the other side in order to have confidence in your current position? But it phrases it in a way that makes it a lot easier to understand what he's getting at.
I think it is interesting. So go ahead, Jeremy.
It's an intellectual virtue to have conditions in your mind that would change your mind about something you strongly believe.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to get at here, is helping people to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And to have the attitude to search for these things ahead of time, all the time.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
Go ahead.
My bad. He started this question with isn't. Negatively phrased questions imply the right answer in them. And that's about as big as bad as saying but from an SE interviewer's perspective, I think.
I think this whole position is also, I think Nathan's right. I think it's kind of uniquely interesting for this guy because he seems to want to operate in a binary space in any case. And so the idea that there might be evidence that might give him pause for thought or questioning seems to sort of challenge this guy's sort of whole worldview. And so that's sort of uniquely interesting. And I also think that this guy's like perspective, because we've not. It was interesting because I think you're right, Janosch, that you don't need to have had the conversation previously about reasons in order to maybe ask what reasons might change your view. But I think the framing of the conversation is wrong. Like I don't think they are on the same page in terms of where this conversation is being had, and so I think it's the framing that's missing that's making it going to make it difficult for him to think of how are we having this conversation and how should I be thinking about responding to that question.
I'm very sorry, William, but I will have to agree with you on this.
All right, here we go.
Under which your belief could be false to justify your confidence in the belief?
Could be false. I mean, I suppose you are right. I would have to be convinced in some way that that statistically and or empirically, America has no racism. I mean, that's just like extending out the America is not racist statement.
Or maybe it's just that it's not as racist as you thought. Like, what evidence would you have to think that it's not as racist as you thought to move you to the agree line?
I don't know, that a lot of people don't experience racism on the day-to-day, for example.
A lot of people, or the majority of people, or some people? Like, a lot meaning like 25?
More people than I've heard. I don't know.
See, that was a great point, but then I don't know why it needed any further clarification. You could have just let that sit. That would have been brilliant. It was a really good reflection. And oh my God, did Peter not only get to a moment of reflection, but he also let the moment sit. He let the man think for like at least 5 seconds. It was a miracle.
That was great. That's my favorite part of the video.
It was really good.
Yeah, that was. I think he could have kind of rewarded him there though as well. I mean, not that I don't mean like treat people like you're kind of conditioning them or something, but I mean be like, well, like yeah, that's great. I like that or something, and then it gets the guy on board. And I mean, I know I'm being pretty harsh to Peter here, but like, the first thing he then comes back with is like, well like what, 25?
Yeah,
and it's like,
exactly.
No, like encourage the behavior you want to see, right? Like the virtues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no need to like what value for Peter is there right now in getting an exact number from the guy on this point? Like why do we think he's asking that question? Because it feels like he's just
get him to think on a gradient.
You think? So
I'm guessing.
So
I think it's to say that he doesn't have sort of justification because he doesn't have a standard. He doesn't have justification for being where he is or something like that. I mean, but that's given the context of the previous part of the conversation. I mean,
yeah. So if he starts to commit to some kind of metric of measurement, then he can be talking. We can start to talk about how he's confident that the metric is where he thinks it currently is to justify his current confidence. I suppose, but again,
I think he could start with like, I guess my mind would be, if I was in this position, would be like, a lot. That's interesting. So if there were a certain number of people that you're describing as a lot said that they just weren't expressing any experiences of racism, that might start to change your mind. And then, okay, well now like a lot, like do you have any idea of what a lot would mean? Or, what if it's like half or more?
Right.
You can kind of go from there.
Yeah,
and just saying that's interesting is basically Nathan's like cookie, right? That's a kind of cool, man. I really like that. That's interesting. Like so let's explore that a bit more. Way more positive than just okay. So give me an actual number. What it was just so aggressive again, and it was like just a beautiful moment, and it just got crushed.
I guess if it's a gradient, which I'm still not convinced it is, it's just is or is not. To me, really, because of its systemic nature.
Systemic. There we go again with systemic. Yeah. Do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
There you go again. There you go again.
God damn it!
The guy just admitted the greatest movement that we've seen so far is maybe it's not binary, and then he just spoke on him about systemic.
Just,
there you go again.
I try my hardest not to think in black and white, so I feel like we're very different.
You and the guy on
I just feel like even though I don't know much, I feel like because I don't know much, I try to understand both sides, and I do understand the fact that people don't see a lot of racism if they're predominantly in a white background, like culture, like city especially. And so I don't I don't go straight to trying to attack them for what they don't know, and I try to listen to what their views are. But I do think that America is racist. And one thing I wanted to say last time, just really quickly, is that especially with the police force, what we were talking about, I think that the system itself is racist within the fact that even though there are few, sometimes more, but I'm going to say few for now, that have done racist things, think racistly.
What, are you talking about police or general citizens?
Right now, police.
Okay.
Even and it's been proven that there have been people have been fired for it, which I think is a good step in equality, kind of what you're asking him about. You have to know the opposite side of what you argue for. And so I do think that's a good step towards equality. And it does prove a point of America is kind of not as racist as it was before. We obviously don't do lynchings. We don't do all these things, but I do feel like that's the bare minimum. But with the police force, what I was saying, even if there's only a few people who have these racist ideologies, the system as a whole, and this was more, I feel like more people are cracking down on it. But as a whole, if you look at 2016, 17, their system backed them up.
Okay, real quick, last question.
I like the idea that America's getting better because we've cut right down on the lynching. Hardly any lynchings. We've just really weaned our way off of that. So it's almost no lynchings now. You'll be fine. but there was a bit at the beginning when I think it was really telling about this system and this setup is when she said, I wanted to say last time, as if this is her second interview, because she wasn't participating in the conversation. Not just she wasn't in the game. He'd left, and even though he was talking to the other guy, she wasn't there. And I think that this is a real problem with this format. Is it's not doing SE with multiple people. It's one person doing SE with multiple people, separately. It's not a group activity. And maybe if there were rules of the game that were used, and again, I don't agree with it being called a game because everybody loses. This is awful. But I wonder if there's a way in which you could set up a narrative where people could maybe interact with each other and it be useful, because right now it feels that that's an implied mechanic that is never realized. As in, are they really allowed to talk to each other? Are they allowed to, explore the view? Are they exploring the views as a collective, as a three, or is it just really Peter the only person that's allowed to speak until you're asked a question?
I like to imagine that while Peter is talking to the lady, the guy is pacing up and down the line. I think the Jeopardy music is playing inside of his head. I like to imagine that.
Yeah,
because it's exactly that. As long as Peter is talking to the other person, you're just out. You're not part of it.
Yeah. He's in the waiting room right now. Yeah.
I think the spectrum is causing a lot of issues right now. This multiple people on the spectrum. I'm not saying that you couldn't do it. It needs to be troubleshooted, I think, pretty heavily at this point.
Well, look that they're close together as well. I mean, imagine if she'd been right at the other end or something.
Yeah. I was thinking that, and that kind of happened on one of the previous videos, as they were much more spread out, and that just only exacerbated the problem with the fact that while he was talking there, I don't even know if they could hear very well what the conversation was.
I do have a little speaker there, so they can't hear each other. Okay.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. So one thing I was thinking is that maybe what you could do at the beginning is get people to run to their positions on the spectrum, but then after people have sort of put their cards on the table, as it were, come together for the conversation, so that you were having the conversation in the middle, and then maybe like halfway through we could say, okay, does anybody change their views? Okay, so 3, 2, 1, like where do you want to go to then? And then sort of come back again, so that you're not committing to the having to do this sort of wide angle of and have people feel not involved so much, and also maybe people might feel less committed to their position because they're not physically standing there.
I wasn't noticing. You all multiple of you have mentioned the guy pacing in the background, and I didn't really notice it until now. But now, like putting on audience eyes, it's very distracting to watch one person talking to another and a person just going back and forth, out of frame and then into frame, it makes it harder to follow the conversation, I think, too. So from an audience perspective, this might also be grueling.
He was like hopping around before, like doing like hops.
He was jumping between the lines.
But there's stuff we can do to help frame it better. And before we get it going, let it not be known we're trying to make this whole collaborative thing. We're trying to talk to each other. We're trying to figure this out together. So there's stuff we can do, I think.
But there's a problem with that as well, though, because if this is a group conversation, like how easy is it? I mean, we've already talked about the fact that it's difficult to maintain the definitions, the kind of pace in the conversation with people. Like SE conversations do tend to be fairly like one-on-one and intense for a reason, because you're trying to get somebody to think through something that they may be struggling with. And so one person, so it's bad enough, Peter jumping in on the pauses. It would be even worse if you've got somebody like me in the group who will just be talking constantly and never shut up, right? So you could have dynamics problems within the group there as well.
Yeah, request not to interrupt or anything, but we do want to,
the group conversation.
I think it's fair to point out too that like this is what I think Jubilee that has like the spectrum, right? So this is done. It's not exactly SE, but it's like this. But there is like one thing I'm thinking, like with the cameras, if two people are talking, they have a camera and they go right up to those two people so you can't see anybody else. And then if there's a broader question that's asked, they'll open it up. But I think the angles might be causing some of the issues too. So that might be one fix.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Two quick ones. Is there anything it would take for you to move to one line or the other? Or you're happy with where you are?
I'm pretty happy with where I am. I do know that there are more facts. There's evidence that could definitely cause me to go to slightly agree. I don't think I would go to disagree. I don't think I would go that far, just because I feel like we have a long way to go before we can say that we're not racist.
Cool. And then the last question, something you made me think about the police and racism in the police force. If you were to guess, you're not an expert, I'm not an expert, I'm not a cop. But if you were to take a guess of how many black men were killed by the police, say last year, roughly what number would you guess? Roughly. Again, you're not an expert. Just take a guess.
Oh, I would. This is just across America.
Yeah.
12 months. Okay, I would say probably in the high hundreds. Maybe around 8. I just
800?
know. Yeah, I just know that there's a lot that we don't, even though we do have technology and the internet and stuff, I feel like there's a lot that doesn't.
Okay, no, I'm not an expert. You're an expert. I'm just trying to get it. Do you want to take a guess with that, or do you want to? We can end now because I'm going to do another claim.
I imagine it's enough, as in disproportional.
What you imagine it's one? I'm sorry.
Disproportional between killing black people versus white people, etc.
Like, do you want to throw a number out there? She gave me 800. You think it's too low or too high or about right?
This is awful.
I don't know.
That's not a question about proportion.
All right. Well,
and fair enough to the guy who said I don't know as well. Like he's like, yeah, I just don't know what the number is.
Yeah,
that probably would have been my answer on the spot too. It's like the exact number. And what 12 months? Like just any 12 months on average, or?
And how does this relate to America's racist? It's obviously Peter's potentially claiming this is a good criteria to judge that question. So if it's a low, then it's probably less likely to be racist. Is that what it is?
This is an agendered narrative. He has these like talking points in his pockets. He wants them out. Yeah, he was hoping that it was going to come up naturally. It didn't, so he's bringing it up for them. But the last thing he said to the guy with the sunglasses was like, "Oh, this again," and then stormed off and talked to the woman. And then he comes back to him and says, "Do you want to answer this question? I'm going to do another thing now anyway, because this one's, it was like, I don't even care what you're thinking." Like he really has to consider these people guests. Like these are people that are coming onto to do this thing for him, for his channel, for his, for his video. At the very least, like he has to consider the fact that he wants to make them feel welcome. And he should be grateful to them for participating, because they're putting themselves out there. This is a day and age where like expressing views on any of this stuff is likely to get you criticized heavily. So I just think that so dismissive, I think, of that guy, and I really would like to see that he was more. And you could say, well, maybe he was very polite to them at the beginning and very polite to them afterwards. But I think it's also really important that he's seen to be being polite to them and respectful to them. And just at the end there, where he was saying, do you want to answer this question? But I don't know. I'm going to change the topic. This is it just felt like a band that had gone on stage and just said, I don't know, I was going to play some songs, but maybe I'll just I don't know. I'm not sure. Like they're there to see you. They're there to. He's ready to participate. So yeah. Anyway.
Well, I appreciate that. Oh, one more quick question. What if I were to show you that number, evidence to your satisfaction and his satisfaction, that number were 22,500? Would you be willing to move to the strongly agree?
I would definitely think about it. I would want to do more research. I feel like there's more things that go into, because I will say there are times when people are genuinely dangerous. The cops do have to shoot or do something.
But 22,000. I'm not saying I have that number. I'm just throwing.
Inside baseball, that's a number that he asked of his neighbor, and that person gave him that number.
All right.
So that's where the number came from.
If I showed you that,
I like
we
how
are
that
seeing
guy was.
dissonance.
What?
Oh, sorry. I think
No,
we
go.
are seeing dissonance now in her belief system, though, because she's sort of, I think she's putting together that she should go up, right? If she found that, like, I think she has a belief that she should go up, but then she's also saying, but I still want to be moderate, and then she's trying to revise the fact that the number of killings, comparing like the number of killings and what that would do in this kind of counterfactual case to the number that she gave, and trying to like reconcile all these beliefs together. But I'm not sure how much we can actually like conclude from any of that at this point in the conversation.
I just like the fact that the guy pacing is really just determined to ruin that other shot that you've got of them two talking really nicely. They're just, you keep trying to cut to it, and it's just never going to work because he's going to be right back in there.
but 22,000. I'm not saying I have that number. I'm just throwing. If I showed you that number was 22,500, would you be willing to move to the strongly agree?
I would, because I do think that's wrong. I do think a lot of times police use their force when it's not necessary, and they do have, some of them have that racist ideology.
Okay, so let me ask you another question. What if I were to show you that number was under 20, closer to 10 to 12? Would you move to the slightly agree?
I would probably move to the slightly agree, but then again, with the same number you gave out last time, I'd want to look more into it.
To your satisfaction, and to the NAACPs, and to...
But there's a danger here that he's saying, if you believe differently, would you believe differently? And incidentally, she was on the slightly agree, but you bullied her off of it. So I don't know.
So you would go back to where you were before the conversation.
It's not exactly do you believe differently. If you found evidence that would imply a certain different belief, would you then believe differently?
Yeah.
But to say no in that situation, you're just basically saying that the evidence doesn't factor into my epistemology, which is quite a thing to say at the end of all of that, especially when you're talking specifically about evidence.
Not really, because even if that number goes into your belief or the confidence of your belief, you could have other aspects that are a lot more important than that number.
Yeah. If it's a strong reason, then yes, I guess a change in that number would change.
Yeah.
Well, I was also going to say, like, the fact that people of color are a minority, because I have family that have the ideology that, like, America isn't racist, like, these things happen, and I never really bring it up, but I do have the thought in the back of my head of white people are a majority while people of color are a minority. So I feel like the argument of...
But the under 20 thing would convince you, if to your satisfaction, if you looked at all the data, we got your professors, experts, and then I have to wrap it up. You'd go to slightly agree?
I don't think I would, actually. No.
You wouldn't go to slightly agree? Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Both of you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
There you go again.
Said but. Yeah, that's the worst problem with this conversation.
Hang on, let's go back.
What is he asking about the numbers? Was that there's something?
The guy just asked, "What is the number?" and Peter just said the number.
I don't think I would, actually. No.
You wouldn't go to slightly agree. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Both of you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Did they ever clarify that it was actually unarmed black men was the number?
It wasn't clarified.
No. We only did it in post.
So the number's not really even accurate then, because
True.
it's a subset.
The answer,
But that's fine. The point stands.
Yeah.
14.
Yeah, but it's.
But that feels even more like a gotcha how that's left, right? Because it's like the way that the question was asked, it's like you clearly haven't had the time to research this, whereas I have beforehand. So there's like this kind of different power dynamic where you like if you're going out to have a conversation with someone and you know what you're going to ask them, then you've got the time to prepare, you know, like your statistics and stuff. And they've not. So then you can ask them like, well, what are the particular figures? And then set up this and like I think that's why the guys say, because he feels like that's going to be done, you know, after the video, and then that's why he's like, so what is the actual? And he's like, yeah, of course, right, because now we've said some really high numbers.
This is what sucks about this, is because this is what people suspect street epistemology always is some kind of trick. It's a you know, just it's an opportunity for somebody who's done their research to bamboozle somebody who was just out walking the dog into suddenly thinking something differently about a deeply held belief, and it's all about a Jedi mind trick that gets you to atheism or something. You know, it's really unfortunate, because you know this is Peter Boghossian, I think, deliberately looking for a conversation about a specific topic with the talking points in his pocket, ready to rebut them, annoyed that they didn't come up, try to inject them artificially into the conversation, and yeah, it just none of it feels very genuine, and it doesn't feel about the people. It doesn't feel like it's about the people he's speaking to, which is the real shame. But maybe that's not the intention.
And that's the point of these reviews. Hopefully, we can get it to be better.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Let's finish this up.
So here's
Is
the
that total or
here's the
black
actual
people?
data. Black people are roughed up more than white people
Right.
once they're in custody.
Right.
Black people are roughed up by black police officers as much as they are by white police officers.
Yes, black people are also capable of racism.
Correct.
Internal, or is it
Black
external?
people are shot at disproportionate rates under the rates at which police officers shoot white people. There have been under 20 shootings of black police, and that's with like young black men launching themselves at officers. I mean, that's the whole thing. So the number is closer to 14. Some people you ask it's 10, some people you ask it's 18, but everybody you would ask would say it's under 20.
Yeah.
Don't you agree that with white people being a majority, there are more, like there's more people, and so
Okay,
there's
let me
more
throw this.
likely- Oh yeah, I'm just
Let me throw
curious.
this out to you before we go. I don't think literally.
She was trying to make the point that black people are a minority in the United States, so we would expect the number to be lower. So she needs the comparison between blacks and whites.
which is a
Yeah, I
good
need
question.
the other number.
Statistically, it's a good point, though,
Non-black,
right?
how many white
Yeah,
people
it is.
are unarmed?
Yeah, she's saying she needs to hear the proportions, and
Yeah.
Peter's not picking that up.
The
to
moment
actually contextualize it.
So yeah, I just wanted to say that the moment they've left this stupid lines game, that you know, they're having a three-way conversation, and it feels like there's a lot more dynamism to the conversation. Like it seems like this almost feels like it would be a better format again for like the kind of conversations I think Peter wants to have.
It feels like there was a facade conversation that was going on, and then that facade was dropped, and this is the real conversation emerging, which is not really how it should be. But
Really, any sane person would disagree that the police have, if you look at the data
Translated
for
language.
murders,
Mhm.
this is a huge thing, and I have to do another crop of people.
Yeah.
The people who are arrested and they're arrested and they convict murders more are men. Like
Okay.
we know that. The
Yeah.
data is, no sane person could disagree with that.
Yeah.
Literally.
How
no.
confident are you in that claim, Peter?
An argument from sanity, I think.
Yeah.
But nobody says the police are discriminatory or biased against men. The reason that the police
Nobody?
have
Right.
more
What would you have to see to change your confidence? You know, like it's like this is perfect.
So, Peter, if I understand you correctly, this is what I'm hearing. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying, yeah.
contact with black people, and then there are consequences that follow from that.
I
So
take
it's
it
just
back,
a
this
question
isn't
of
the
like
better
looking
format.
and figuring out what the data
Why do
is.
they have more contact with black?
There's the question. Now could be the systemic part. It could be any one of a number of reasons, but you have to have a conversation about it. Anyway, I hope you found that helpful.
Why didn't you have that conversation in the game? Like that's a point
Because
you
the
should.
game got in the way.
Anyway,
Okay to ask where
I
you
mean,
On which part about it?
just the America's racist.
Yeah, I would do that at the end of the day. I can't give that away because
Oh,
we're gonna do other.
He should have given his opinion at the end.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
one of the lessons I've learned, I know I got to wrap it up. One of the lessons
Well,
I've
I
learned
mean,
is I tell
so
people what I think that biases them to.
A point to make on this is I don't know how recent that his appearance on like Brett Weinstein's podcast was in response to this, right? But in that conversation, like Brett Weinstein mentions like what he calls them conspiracy hypotheses, not conspiracy theories. But that one of the conspiracy hypotheses, for example, is that critical race theory is a mind virus, right? Literally, and talks about this, and maybe it was invented by the communists or the Chinese in order to destroy the West, and like all these things. And and then in that case, Peter doesn't, kind of come out with the street epistemology in that circumstance.
Yeah. And I encouraged Pete to go on Brett's podcast because of these, potentially extraordinary claims that he's making, that I want Pete to use SE to explore and get his disconfirmation criteria and making sure it's everything is clear, just to help get the conversation better out there. So, but that failed to happen, and I'll talk to him about that when I'm in person next week.
How early on in the tour was this this video?
This was the second to last day before the PSU stuff.
How often are we now doing Peter Boghossian review videos? Because I'm not here for all of them, but I also don't want it to get to the point where because we've loaded it pretty heavily at this point, and I think all our criticisms are fair, but it might, if we're concerned with Peter growing in this, I don't think throwing just a bunch of crap at the wall and hoping some sticks is going to be the best method. So something to keep in mind in the future for reviews.
I think it's worth bearing in mind though that Peter is a very in the SE sphere he's as public a figure as we have, right? So whether we think he's the best example of SE or not, he's going to be the prescient example of SE, and therefore I think it's probably fair, I don't know, but probably important that we point out that this isn't what SE is about necessarily, and that SE should be doing this differently. And this is what we did last time as well, which was like, if Peter's not claiming that this is street epistemology in action, then fair play. Like all of this criticism is entirely tangential, commentary. But if Peter is, as I think he has done on the video descriptions, claimed that this is street epistemology, then I think it's fair to criticize it as such. And I think given that he's the prominent figure, I think it's important that we do it.
Yeah, that's fair, but also at the same time, he seems very passionate about a lot of these topics too, and so, I don't want potential emotions to occlude what could be criticism, but I completely take your point, Will, and I agree.
I have this past week seen some people say in response to things that Peter's done in other areas have said, well, maybe, his street epistemology doesn't work, right? Maybe this is evidence of that he isn't, raising some of these questions and things. And I don't think that's right, because I think street epistemology is very useful for exploring these claims. But I think it's good for you guys to at least have some criticism, to kind of say, look, it's like reflexive in this way. You kind of criticize the people who are doing it. It's not like because he's got like a special halo effect or something because he's more famous than other people who do it. But you don't want to over egg, you don't want to just make it about
Reid,
I just want to say, I think it's important that what's useful here in this dynamic is that street epistemology is hopefully going to improve Peter's interactions rather than Peter. Because honestly, I think if this advice is taken on board, and I know like Reid's participating in these videos, and you're saying that you're going to be going out there and you might think things differently because of this conversation. I think street epistemology, as it is now, is going to have a positive, hopefully, impact on how effective Peter is at achieving the goals he's looking to achieve here. This hopefully is useful criticism, and none of it's meant bitterly. I don't think anybody's being cruel or unkind on purpose. And so I think we're all trying to get in the same direction, and so I think it's just as important that we help him as it is obvious. It should be clear to people that what he's doing isn't currently informing modern day SE. Like, this approach is not going to become SE because Peter's doing it. And this is the fact that we're here right now is a good demonstration of that fact, that SE has become something else, and it's now informing Peter as opposed to the other way around.
What I was going to say, just real quick, Reid, you said you wanted to get Peter to interview who was that?
Brett Weinstein.
Brett Weinstein on these claims. Maybe you could even ask him the next time you go out with him. Maybe you just put up the claim, there is no systemic racism, or systemic racism doesn't exist, or whatever, and have him interview that claim, because that's usually what SE is about. You can interview any claim and its opposite, and the best way, or one good way to practice SE, is to interview people on something that you strongly agree with. Because then you also have to ask these critical questions. What would change your mind? What would you have to see to change your mind? So maybe that's an idea.
Completely agree. I think there's a lack of that sort of devil's advocate positioning from Peter. I think he's arguing very much from a position of his opinion. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
During the first hour,
2 seconds left.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dali.
During the first hour, we had the chat seemed to be saying we're being too harsh, and then the second hour that seemed to go away a bit. I want to agree. We might be being too harsh, and I think that's okay. We're pointing out the errors, and overall, I'm going to give Peter a B- on this one, and on the average of what I've seen from the overall tour, a B+. He's making mistakes, but I think most of what he's doing is productive and positive.
I agree.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think my concern is just we're doing it too much. We're loading it. It's not that, we're being too harsh. It's that we're, like if you're a teacher, not that we should view ourselves as teacher, you give your student a paperback and it's just riddled with red marks, right? That's a sure sign that they're probably not going to make the changes you want because you're giving them too much. So
how many of Peter's view videos have we done? I know I've done.
That's what I was wondering, right?
Yeah,
I think just one before, and on my channel I did.
There was one you did,
plus a second,
and I missed that.
So probably this is the third one, I think.
If you compare it to a lot of like Speakers Corners videos, or like like it's much better discourse than what a lot of people are doing, where they just go out and do want to debate the point. So yeah, that is definitely a positive thing in its favor. But I think what I and other people are finding frustrating is that you can see that these people are open to, like, if the method had been applied differently, like they could have been, but there could have been really good outcomes in this conversation, and seeing that kind of like squandered, is it, even if it's not as bad as it could have been, like, yeah, here's the truth, you're an idiot outright, like all that kind of stuff. It's just frustrating because it could have been just these little changes would have made it so much better. These people probably would have gone away with a stone in their shoe, as the apologists like to say.
Yeah. And it's slightly interesting to notice how little of the methodology that he recommends in his books that he's applying in here. Like, most of the things that we're calling out have been codified in a lot of the material, at least originated in a lot of the material that Peter's written on the topics of having these kinds of conversations. And it's kind of interesting. I wonder, has he reflected on that much, that he doesn't seem to be applying his own sort of methodologies to these conversations?
I wonder if you're talking about the first or second book too. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I could see where he's not applying. The second book probably more. Okay. I still think there's things he's not applying even from the first book. But
that's just to be clear for anybody who's not aware. That's a manual for creating atheists is the first book, and how to have impossible conversations is the second book. But yeah, I just, like, for example, we keep mentioning but, and we keep hearing direct messaging, and we keep hearing interruptions, and we keep, and a lot of this stuff is explicitly called out in his books as bad ways to have, to have an effective conversation.
Well, in the first one though, which I'm currently reading, he gives examples of conversations that he has, and some of them are not that bad from a looking back. Some of them are horrible, even measured to the or held up to the standards in this very same book. They're not good SE conversations. So there's just a gap between theory and practice, I think.
Yeah. And incidentally, I mean, I think maybe it's important to notice that How to Have Impossible Conversations is not really a book about street epistemology. I mean, it's not specifically setting out to define or codify the SE practice and approach, even though sort of much of it is good advice in general. Yeah, interesting. I'm loving chat, by the way. It's gotten a lot more colorful recently.
Yeah, very nice. So yeah, cool. Thanks everyone for the review video. We'll probably be back to our regular scheduled SE reviews with other SE content creators next week. And yeah, appreciate everyone for watching. Any last word, anybody?
Like, comment, subscribe. I'll say it.
Yep. We'll have all our links and channel names in the description. So check us out there. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.